How's it going, everyone? What's up, and welcome to the first Tech Gear Talk live stream. I'm super excited to do an unboxing and a Q&A session of the Canon EOS M50. And this is the first actual live stream where I'm talking about a product. I did do a test last night, but this is really the official first one. I had to start somewhere, so it's going to be a learning experience for everyone. Now, if you've watched my other camera reviews, you know that they're pretty detailed, and they're probably longer than most camera reviews that you see. But I like to cover all the features and functionality of the product, and then also talk about real life use of the product. So it's not just the specs. And this is going to be something a little bit different because normally in my reviews, I've already used the product for a couple of weeks and at least, and I don't really do an unboxing. So I thought that this would be a good opportunity to do an unboxing of the Canon M50 and then at the same time open it up to a Q&A or cover some questions and thoughts that I have about this camera before I actually use it. And if you are new to this channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification buttons if you're interested in more videos and live streams about cameras and just other tech reviews in general. So I'm gonna again start out by just doing an unboxing and giving you my first impression of the Canon M50, and then again I'll open it up to Q&A about this camera and then just about any tech subject in general that you might be interested in, that you want to talk about. I have some pretty exciting new things that are coming up in the channel, and I'm super excited to share them with you. So before we get started, the M50 sells for $779 in the US right now, and the kit that I'm going to use here that comes with a 15 to 45 millimeter kit lens sells for $849. So I'm sorry, $899. So it's $779 for just the body or $899 for the body and the lens. And so that's a pretty good deal because the lens itself sells for $300. And I'll put links in the description to where I buy my stuff and where you can get some more information about this camera. Now, one of the things that makes this camera, or that one of the reasons I was excited about it, is that this is the first consumer mirrorless camera or consumer camera in general from Canon that shoots 4K video. And if you are interested in cameras and if you know the space, then you know that Canon's really been behind in terms of resolution. Now they have other strengths, and we'll talk about them later, autofocus and color science and so on and so forth. But in terms of just pure resolution, they have been behind other companies like Sony and Panasonic. And so this is the first camera that Canon released for consumers that can shoot 4K. And so that's really exciting, and definitely one of the things that made me I just couldn't wait for this camera to come out, and then now I finally have it. Now let's talk about 4K for a little bit now, and I want to tell you why I think it's such a big deal, and then at the same time we'll talk about it in more detail later on. So some of the advantages of shooting 4K are that, for example, so in case you don't know, 4K versus 1080p means that in 4K you're actually getting 4 times the number of pixels. So if you took a high def video that's 1920 by 1080, you'd actually could put 4 of those, and that would make up the frame or the resolution of a 4K video. So you're getting a lot more pixels to work with. You're getting a much bigger image with better detail. And so it actually will give you even better detail if you downscale it down to 1080. Gives you more flexibility when it comes to grading, your future proofing, your content. You're also able to reframe your image better if you're going to publish your content in 1080. And there are some other advantages of shooting in 4K. I'm just going to take a moment and just say hi to everyone that's joined. Thank you very much for joining the live stream, and I appreciate those of you who have already said that they've shared this live stream on Facebook. So if you're on, go ahead and retweet it, share it on Facebook. Let's get some more people on here. And there are definitely some cons to shooting 4K as well, so we're going to get to those a little bit later. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up. Again, I'm excited. Like, I literally have not opened this box, so I don't even know what to expect, but let's get going. And if you've seen some of my other Canon camera reviews, I did a review of the Sony SL2, the M6, and the G7X Mark II. And this is very, very similar packaging. You know, we've got all the manuals here first. Put those to the side. And then here, I'm gonna give you a closer view. So we've got a camera strap. Put that down there. This is gonna be the body of the camera. So we're just gonna put it down right here. And what looks like a charger. And let's see what else is here. We have the lens itself. And then finally, we've got the battery. So where should we start? I think we all want to start with the camera itself. All right, so this is my first time handling the Canon M50 here. It is really, really nice. It's pretty small here. I'm going to give you a messy view of what I have going on here. But the camera itself is pretty small. It's about the size of the M6, except for you can see that Canon added a viewfinder, the electronic viewfinder, of course. So that adds a little bit to the size up here. But other than that, the body is pretty small, but it's not too small where I feel like I'm gonna drop it. So that's nice. I'm seeing that there is only one dial here to control all the functionality. So that's gonna be interesting. Usually there's another dial on the back. But we'll get to this section in a moment. What else am I noticing? They moved the record button, and now it's right next to the shutter release. So that's actually pretty convenient, assuming that you don't mix those up, because for some cameras it's on the back. I think I like the fact that they moved it up here. We've got an articulating screen, I believe. Let's take a look at it. I'm gonna open it this way so you can see it. So this is a 3-inch articulating screen. So I can go ahead and flip it to the front, which would be nice if I'm wanting to shoot in selfie mode like that. And then of course, so when you stow it away, you can just have it like this, and now nothing can happen to it. If you're behind the camera, whoops, you're gonna flip it up and lock it into place like this. And then if you're in front of the camera, you can use it this way. And I like this setup because it doesn't block the hot shoe up here. So if you wanna mount an external microphone, which we'll get to in a second, let's see if this camera can accept an external microphone. How about we start there? Yep, so there is a little door right here that says mic. And let me see if I can figure out how to open it. So there you go. It looks like it pulls out a little bit. And so this will accept an external mic input. And then you can actually mount the microphone right up here. So some cameras have a flip screen, and if it flips up, then you can't actually mount the microphone here because the microphone would be blocking the screen itself. Whereas here, because the screen articulates to the side, it's not going to block this microphone. So that's really nice. I like that a lot. Overall, the build quality is, it's a little plasticky, but not so bad. And this grip is really nice. So again, some cameras are a little small and I feel like I'm gonna drop them, but not this particular one. I feel like I'm still able to get a pretty nice grip and my hand is not covering the screen when I'm holding it. So that's actually really, really nice. We've got the on-off button right here. It's not charged, so I don't know if it'll even turn on. Let's see, looking at the screen. Oh, and I didn't put the battery in, so it's definitely not going to turn on, I promise. This is a mirrorless camera. I see one of the questions in the chat, and go ahead and feel free to ask any questions that you want. They have to do with this camera, and then later on in the video, if you have just general Q&A, we'll get back to those, so make sure you stay with me. So yeah, I need to put the battery in here. So let's go ahead and I'll continue with everything else. So this is going to be the battery right here. It's pretty standard. One of my questions about this mirrorless camera, and if you're not sure about the difference between mirrorless cameras and DSLR, it's basically a DSLR camera has a series of mirrors that sit behind the sensor that redirect the image up. Then there's another mirror and another mirror, and then you're able to see what the lens sees through this optical viewfinder. Now on a mirrorless camera like the M50, this viewfinder is an EVF. It's an electronic viewfinder. So it's an electronic view of what the sensor would see, and there's no mirror in there, no series of mirrors. So that is why mirrorless cameras are a lot smaller than DSLRs, because you don't need room in here for that entire mechanism, because the first mirror the one that sits right by the sensor is at a 45-degree angle. So that takes up a lot of space and moves everything forward. But here you can see the mirrorless camera is really, really small. All right, so we've got the battery, and let's just pop that in there. I think it's gonna go this way. Let's see, nope, definitely not. Or I can't even get the battery to go in, so that's not gonna be a good sign. It goes that way. Boom, and locked. All right. Well, I just inadvertently popped the flash, so there you go. It does have a flash. There is no button that I see here for the flash, so I think you might need to manually do this, but again, in a more detailed review, I'll get back into talking about this. So let's open this kit lens, and this is a 15 to 45 millimeter or 35 millimeter equivalent. Another nice thing about mirrorless cameras is it's not just the body that's small, but the lenses themselves are very, very small. So this makes this a mirrorless camera a really good option for taking this on the road, traveling. You can just throw this in a pocket with you and you're good to go. Let's see if we can see. So this has a 24.2 megapixel APS-C sensor. I believe it's 24.2. It's 24.1. See, I gave him that extra 0.1 there. And let's see if we can see it. Yep. So there you go. You can see the sensor sits right here, whereas with a DSLR, you wouldn't be able to see it because there would be a mirror right in front of it. So that gives you a good idea of what the APS-C sensor looks like. Let's cover that back up so nothing happens to it. And go back to this lens. And so again, this is a 15 to 45. It's tiny. Let's go ahead and install it. And pop that out. Pop that in here and lock it in place. And one of the things that stumped me about the first time I used these cameras is, so the lens is locked, but you can't use it yet. If you try to turn the camera up right now, it wouldn't work. The reason is there's this little arrow right here that in order to, I think that was it. Yeah, and the first time, let me show you. You have to slide it. So right now, you can see it's locked. I can't do anything, but if I slide it up, now, I don't know if you heard that click, But now notice it's not sliding all the way back. It's staying right where it is. Before it was up here. So now I can actually use the lens. And this is how it was in the beginning. Now it's locked. And if I slide it, now listen, click, and now we're good to go. So super tiny lens, kind of cute. And again, you're getting a pretty powerful camera in a really, really small body. So let's get all this stuff out of the way. And woo! Put that back here so nothing happens to it. So one of the questions that I see in the comments in the chat window is whether this is a good camera for vlogging and for normal YouTube content. And it would be an outstanding camera for that, basically because of its size. There will be some things that we're going to talk about, or that I'm going to talk about definitely in the detailed review, for some limitations of this camera, let's say it that way. And so definitely make sure that you subscribe and hit that notification button so you come back for that. But this is a really nice and portable small camera. It's light, so if you're going to throw it on something like the little GorillaPod, you can easily hold it and walk around with it and record yourself. And like I said, you can just throw this in your pocket and take it with you anywhere. So it's really nice and portable. And I love the fact that it has an external mic input that I showed you already, so you can get better audio than what you would normally if you were just using the built-in microphone that's on the camera. I'm going to take a little water break here. So it's interesting. So is it worth buying is one of the questions that I see from Icy Blue in the live chat. And let me just switch this view. We'll go like that. So is it worth buying? So that's a general question about cameras that I like to discuss. And it comes down to whether a camera is good or not. So when someone says, is this a good camera? My response to them is always, like, what are you going to use it for? Let's start there and then work our way backwards about whether or not this is a good camera for you. Because I have a lot of different types of cameras, and I think they're all good for what I use them for, and that's why I have different types of cameras. So if I was to compare this to a Canon cinema camera, well, is the image going to be as good? No. So that might make it not as good. At the same time, I'm not going to take a cinema camera and just throw it in my pocket and be able to travel with it. So in that regards, I'd rather have this camera. And realize that I just put it out of frame so you couldn't see it anymore. How much is the camera? So the body alone of the Canon M50 is $779 right now. And again, there's a link in the description so you can go ahead and click on it and get some more information about pricing and different lenses and options. And this particular lens, if you buy it alone, is $299. But if you buy this kit together, you're actually getting this lens for $120 instead of $300. So I think that's a super good deal. Now, depending on where you are in the world, your price is going to be different. So I'm just giving you the prices as I check them today in the US, but it might be different where you are. So I'm getting, let's look at another comment from Alex R. Not convinced yet that it's worth the price difference when compared to the SL2. Looking forward to the comparison between the M50 and the SL2. So if you haven't seen my Canon SL2 review, please go ahead and check it out after this live stream. It's one of my favorite cameras. Hands down, it's one of my favorite cameras. It's less expensive than this M50. Now it's a DSLR camera, so it's not a mirrorless camera, which means it's bigger. Now for a DSLR, the SL2 is actually pretty small, but it's not going to be as small as something like the M50. And I think one of the major questions, and again, I don't know because I haven't used this camera yet, but one of the major questions is, first, do you need 4K video? Because if you decide that the answer is yes, so then the SL2 is it's not an option anymore. If the answer is maybe, Okay, so now you have to decide, look, what does this camera give me over this camera? So for example, this is a mirrorless camera, so right out of the box, it's going to accept all of the EF-M mount lenses, whereas the SL2 can accept both EF and EFS mount lenses. So you've got some more options there. Now, you can get an adapter from Canon that will accept any mount lens, even on this camera, but I think it costs either $200 or $300. So that's adding to your total cost, but it will give you the option to do that. And like I said, the lenses that you're gonna get on the SL2 are gonna be much bigger than that. Even the lower end lenses are gonna be much bigger than this. So it's always a consideration. And Check It Media says the M50 can shoot in 4K. Yes. So yes, the M50 can shoot in 4K, but only at 24 frames per second. So you can't shoot at 30 or 60. So that's limiting. And like I said, I'll get more into this in my detailed review, but it also shoots at 24K with a cropped version of the sensor. So it's a windowed version. So you're not actually using the entire sensor when you get 4K video. So that's something to consider. And there are some implications there. And like I said, I'll cover that in the more detailed review. So another question from Check In Media. Are you going to test it in vlogging style? Because I get a lot of questions about vlogging. Maybe you can test this for us. Absolutely. So I'll probably try to actually not just test it, but maybe even shoot a vlog using this camera. And my guess is that it's going to be pretty good because, again, it's very similar to the M6, which is another one of my favorite Canon cameras. And I think it's going to be a really good option for vloggers. It's really just a question of the 4K feature that is included on this. Is it something that you need, and how that's going to work for vlogging? But this camera uses the Canon dual pixel autofocus, which is probably my favorite autofocus on the market. It's so fast and it's so accurate, and the M50 also has eye detection, so it's going to automatically detect your eyes and then set focus there if you wanted to. Of course, you can disable that, but that's really nice. But honestly, with the SL2, with the M6, with these Canon cameras, I never have an issue with autofocus. I literally don't think about it at all. I just set it and I know that I'm in focus. And at the same time, it's nice to have the articulating screen when you're in front of the camera, because you'll be able to see that you're in focus, because it'll draw like a white square around you as you're moving, and it will track you as you're moving through the camera. As you're moving through the frame. So that's really nice, because you don't end up recording an entire segment of your video and then realize that you weren't in focus or that you weren't framed correctly. And some of the cameras on the market that have, like for example, some of the Sony cameras that I reviewed don't have an articulating screen. It only flips up and down a little bit. And for me, that's a problem when I'm in front of the camera, because I can't see how I'm framed. I don't know if the autofocus detected me. And so that's, for me, an articulating screen is something that I love to have. And for a vlogging camera, it's definitely something that I consider a must. You can use external monitors, etc., but now you're requiring me to have more equipment that I'm taking with me. And if I want to vlog, if I want to take this on the road with me, I now have to bring more stuff with me. And as much as possible, I'd like to remove as much of the friction from the content creation process. So the less I have to worry about, the more content I'll create. Every little step, even if it's simple, right? Like attaching an external monitor to a camera. There's an HDMI out right here. Let me just switch views for you. There's an HDMI out. Yes, yep. And this is how you charge it as well. And that's it. And you connect it to an external monitor. But it's another thing I need to bring with me. It's another thing I need to keep charged. So it's much easier to just flip this out and call it a day. So I see from Title Gardens, 4K is a big commitment in terms of computer power and storage. And that's absolutely right. So some of the cons, and I didn't really get into it in the beginning, we talked about the pros of 4K, but some of the cons are, first, you're going to need faster memory cards because the actual image that you're recording is 4 times the size. So the card needs to be able to write faster than what you need for a 1080p. You then, like Title Garden said, you need to store all that footage. So now the actual output file that you're getting is a lot larger than one for 1080p. Now we're going to get to actually editing it. So most regular computers are not going to like editing. Even higher end computers are not going to like editing 4K footage. It's super intensive in terms of resources on your computer. When you're talking about scrubbing 4K video, just to be able to do that, and previewing, the rendering, of course. And then if you do any type of visual effect, if you're working in After Effects in 4K, you better have a nice computer. So when you make this consideration, so 4K is better. It is better. You're getting more detail. There's more for you to work with. If you're doing things like image stabilization, there are more pixels for your editing software to work with, but it definitely comes at a cost. And speaking of image stabilization, I believe this has both an in-body, like a 5-axis digital stabilization, and the lens itself has an image stabilizer. This lens is stabilized. I don't know if you could see this, but I'll do close-ups in my actual review. And so there's a question of what is the max wide angle on the kit lens, and will that matter a lot for vlogging? So the max width here is 15, which is actually plenty if you're going to just vlog. Now, one of the things to consider is that when you're shooting, so I'm sorry, so I think I misspoke before. I think this is 15 to 45. I'm not sure if that's a 35 millimeter equivalent or not. If someone can go check that for me, that'd be great. But if you're going to vlog in 4K, this camera actually, because it's using a windowed version of the shutter or of the sensor, you have to apply another 1.6 crop factor. So you're not actually getting to shoot at 15. Now I believe this 15 is already not a 35 millimeter equivalent. So this is actually going to be like a 24 to 72, if I'm not mistaken. And so now you're going to take that 24 and you're going to have to multiply it by another 1.6. And now if you want to vlog in 4K, now you're going to run into issues in terms of hand holding this camera, or if you're in a tight space. So that's something to consider. And that's why some of the things that you see, if you're only looking at the specs and you go, okay, I could shoot 4K at 24 frames per second. Okay, but hold on, let's go deeper into that. And again, that's why my reviews are so detailed, because I think those nuances are important. So from Check It Media, I want to thank you for your work and your nice channel. Short sub, but I find your style very nice, so thank you. Well, thank you. I really appreciate anyone watching and taking the time to leave feedback. Even sometimes, even if it's not good, I appreciate feedback because it's really the only way for me to get better. So thank you so much for watching. There's a question from Icy Blue. Do you need good lighting for this camera? So it has a nice APS-C sensor. So it's going to do okay in low light. And it's got the Digic 8 processor, so that's also going to help. But in order to get the best image, you always need good lighting. So there are cameras that are going to be better in low light, and there are some that aren't going to do so well. But if you can supply good lighting, then you are really helping your image quality with any camera. Even a camera that can shoot great footage at a higher ISO, I'd still rather shoot a lower ISO and provide additional lighting if that's possible. It's not always possible, but if it is, I always prefer to add lighting. And it doesn't have to be super expensive lighting, but so even if you're using natural lighting and you're facing a window, if you can just go to Home Depot and buy some clip-on lights and then put some diffusion paper over them, you can get really good light without spending a lot of money. From Mike, great demo, thanks. You're very, very welcome. And from Ben, I hope the mic jack doesn't obstruct the view of the articulating screen when using the external mic. So on the SL2, you're gonna have the same thing. It will a little bit. You're absolutely right. Let me see if I can, because what you're gonna have is a cable that comes out of here, and the screen's gonna be, but the cable is then gonna come up here. So it really, let me get you a closer view, because you're gonna plug your mic right in there, and then the cable is gonna come out, but it's a 90 degrees, so it's gonna come up, and then the rest of it is gonna go back here, and your mic's gonna be pointed forward. So it shouldn't be an issue. And I don't have a mic, it's funny because I have about 10 mics right there, that I don't have with me, but I should have brought one. But definitely in the more detailed review, I will have it on camera with a mic. But that's a really, really good question. And Check It Media says most of the time you can pull the cord out of the way. So that's very true. And again, for me, this screen is really most important before I start recording. I just want to make sure that I'm framed and that I'm in focus. So even if you're hiding, let's say, this much of it, it's not a big deal. Because I'm not constantly, I can't watch the screen while I'm on camera. But when I sit down, I know I'm framed correctly. I can see that the camera detected my face, and I know it's not going to lose it because I'm not like running out of the frame and coming back, even though it would pick it back up, even if I did that. So that's a really good question. So Icy Blue says, what one thing would you change about this camera? Well, I haven't used it yet, so I can tell you some things that I might change about the specs of the camera. I mean, I would love for it to shoot 4K 30 or 4K at 60 frames per second. I would like for it to shoot 4K by using the entire sensor, so I don't have to apply an additional crop factor to it. So those are a few things, again, before using it. Now in the detailed review, I might add some other things that I just don't know yet because I haven't used it. And Aaron's Vlogs, can this be charged using a USB? So yes, I believe so. There is micro USB here. I don't know if it can be used to charge the camera, but I'm assuming it can. And one of my questions about this camera is, can I use it while it's charging? So if the battery is in here and I have it plugged in, would I be able to continuously record? Because one of the issues with mirrorless cameras in general is that because there's no optical viewfinder and you're using the screen, even when that means the screen is always on. And guess what? The screen is on, it's using battery. And so one of my questions is, can I turn the screen off at some point and only use the EVF and then save some battery life? And then if not, can I use it continuously while it's being charged? I know that, for example, the Sony a6500, when I would take it out and if I'd go do some street photography, I'd have it plugged into an external battery, and that would let me always keep it charged, which was really, really nice. So from Wrong in the Right Ways, if you have an SD card that can write 120 megabytes per second, will 4K not get saved, or will it just do that at the limits of the card? I believe the answer, it's not that it won't get saved, it will. And you know what, I'm not really sure. I'm gonna have to look into that. If someone else in the comment section below knows the answer, and I might be wrong, because Title Garden says if the card isn't fast enough, lots of cameras will fail to write to it. So there you go. And I like learning new stuff too. So I usually don't risk it, honestly. You know, if you're spending enough money on the camera, the card. You should just get one that you know would work. But that's actually a really, really good question, and one that I haven't really thought about. So thank you so much for bringing that up. And that's, that might be something I want to do in my review, is grab one of my old cards, if I still have one that's slow, and see what happens when I try to shoot in 4K. So that's a really good question. Thank you again. Aaron's Vlogs, would you suggest the 200D or the M50? So the 200D, that's how it's known internationally. It's the SL2 that we talked about before. And I love that camera. I think it's almost unbeatable. I think it's unbeatable for the price. And I haven't shot with this camera yet, so it's hard for me to say which I would pick. So you'd have to watch the detailed review, and maybe I'll do another live stream after that, once I really did a hands-on with this camera. And you know what? I'm gonna clean this up here a little bit. Get rid of all this stuff. There, that's better for me. Better visually. All right, let's see what else. Go get the mic, we will wait. Then I have to open it, it's in the box. You just wanna see how much it's blocking on the camera? We'll see, maybe I'll get around to it. And, okay, so let's see. All right, so there's another question about comparing the M50 to the SL2, and this time for photography. So one of the comments that I've gotten on some of my earlier videos and camera reviews is that I don't focus enough on photography, and that I really go into video, because that's mostly what I do is video. And for photography, I usually use, one of my, like a 5D Mark III or something like that. And so I tried in my last review to really go into the photography aspect of it. I'll make sure that I do more low light options and compare it to the SL2 from a photography standpoint. You know what? I'll go get the mic. Let's go get the mic. What are we doing here? That's why we're doing it live. All right, so I just picked a Rode Video Micro. We'll do there. Here, you know what? Let's switch that. Get this camera out of the way. This is like a double extra bonus unboxing here. And this I've definitely used before. And I should update that and put a link in the description to this also. So this would definitely be a mic that I would pair up with the M50 if you want to keep everything small. And so actually the mic itself is just this small, and this dead cat is what's going to block the wind. So in order to install it, you can use a little clamp here, just snap it in there, and there's a groove so it sits nicely and doesn't go anywhere. It's a plug for Rode, hashtag not sponsored. Come on, Rode. And then I'll bring the camera into view here, take this off, and essentially you just unscrew that, put that on, and there you go. And this little shock mount is what takes away the vibration, and the sound doesn't get transferred to this shotgun mic. Now, for those of you who don't know why you might want to use a shotgun mic, is it's much more directional than the microphone on the camera, which is going to be omnidirectional. So essentially, if you're going to hold this camera this way, this shotgun mic has a pickup pattern that's going to be directional. It's going to pick up more sound from the front, and it's going to reject sounds from the sides and the back, much more than a microphone that's omnidirectional and is going to pick up sound from everywhere. Now, again, if you want to protect your mic from wind noise, you're going to install this dead cat on it. So now to connect this to the camera, got to open this again out of the way. We're going to plug one side in there, and the other part here. I'll show you what I'm doing. Let me give you a closer view to the back of the camera. And you can see it's not really obstructing the view. Here, I'll show you a reflection of the light. So it's really not bad. It's really out of the way. Let me know what you think in the comment section. But as far as I'm concerned, this is not really in the way. And definitely is offset by the benefit of using a nice, even this is a very small one. I've got a few other options. So that's one of the things that I'm going to be doing is a review of all these mics to really tell you what the best value is. So let me know what you think. All right, let me see what else is in there. Let me just take a look at the chat. What do I think about from GarageBiz? What do I think about the video quality between the 200D in full HD and the M50 in full HD? Which one will be sharper? So I don't know yet because I haven't used it. If I had to guess, you know, it's tough because some of it will depend on the lenses. You can put nicer lenses on the 200D. For those of you who are in the US, the 200D is the Canon SL2. And, you know, I can put L series glass or lenses on the SL2, which is going to be a much nicer lens than the kit lenses or even the M series lenses. But that, again, it depends on what, so it's not just the body and the sensor, it's also, and the processor, it's also the lenses that you're going to use. But ultimately, I think that you're going to be able to get outstanding quality from both of them. There's a lot more that goes into it than just the equipment itself. Now, the M50 uses the Digic 8 processor, where the SL2 uses the Digic 7. So this is a newer processor. It's very similar size APS-C sensor. So it's got a better processor. I bet you it's pretty close. I bet you it would be pretty tough to see the difference. And I'm interested in seeing the difference, especially in low light. So that's a really good question. All right, so let's go on. So this is a great mic. So Icy Blue is asking, can you use this mic for your phone? You can with an adapter, but I think, well, I know that Rode makes one that will attach directly to your phone. So if that's your primary objective, that's one to consider. And I would always get one that, well, there are some adapters that you can use. I can actually connect and have like XLR microphones, like the shotgun mic that I'm using here, to my phone using an iRig 2 adapter. And I'll put a link to that in the description as well. But that's a really nice, there's a lot of flexibility there if you're willing to get an adapter. All right, so going back to the chat here, what we're gonna do is switch to this. And yes, there's a question about how you connect a microphone to a phone, and that's right, you're gonna do it where your headphones connect. And let me scroll down. I scrolled up to see some more of the chat. All right, so the next question is the Sony a6000 or the Canon 200D. And that's a good question. I think the first thing I would ask you is, again, do you have a preference about DSLR versus mirrorless cameras? Again, I think we're getting to the point with consumer cameras that from an image quality, they're all getting to be pretty good. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, the SL2 is going to have better focus. It's going to have better continuous autofocus than the A6500. I promise. And to me, that's important. But like I said in the beginning of this stream, what are you going to use it for? If you're going to be in front of the camera and now you don't have an articulating screen or a flip screen and the autofocus isn't as good, and regardless, you can't tell if you're in focus or not because you can't see the screen, that's a problem. If you're using it just for photography, that's something else. So again, it depends on what you're going to use the camera for before we can decide which camera is better. But the SL2 is a newer camera. Now again, the A6000, if you just look at the specs, it's better. But in real life, for what I would use it for, I'd probably go with the SL2. So someone said, show the iRig adapter. Sure, now I have to find it. All right, I'll be back. We're live. All right, so on top of that, I need to find an XLR cable. And that's not one. So, well, one side of it is. So, when I want to connect, here's my iPhone. I'm going to grab that. And, you know, someone asked me to do it without the case. So, for my iPhone, I actually need multiple adapters because I first use a Lightning to 3.5. And you know what? I'm going to go into a tighter angle here. So first, this came with the iPhone. It's just a regular Lightning to 3.5. And then the adapter that I was talking about is the iRig Pre. And it's really nice. It takes a single 9-volt battery, and what I can do is take this and then plug it into this adapter. So I basically have this little setup right here. And then this is an XLR input. So for those of you who are familiar with it, on a microphone, this is a microphone cable, but it would look like that. And I'd be able to plug it in and it would work. So I love this. If you're interested, again, I'll go ahead and put links in the description to this. So as soon as this video is over, I'll go and update it with all the products that we talked about. But this is really nice. Now again, it's another thing I have to carry with me, but again, I think that to have the flexibility to get outstanding audio on your phone, I think it's totally worth it. One other thing that I wanted to talk about as far as this touchscreen is concerned is that this touchscreen is going to let you, see if it'll turn on. Yay. Okay, so this touchscreen is going to let you, why is it yelling at me? Oh, it's giving me all these tips. So this touchscreen is going to let me see how it keeps things in focus. So let's say, for example, I click on that. And now, can you tell that it's following it? Even as I move the frame, which is really nice. So again, that's why I like to have the articulating screen, because, for example, here I'm trying to figure out how to show you this. There's really no good way. You know what, maybe if I switch to this angle. But I don't know if you'll be able to see this. There you go. So I'm trying to remove the reflection for you. It's super tough because the light is right in front of the camera. But basically, I can always tell, like if I'm holding it like this, and there you go, I'm at 15, I can see that I'm in focus. So let me see if I can do this that way. Now it's the problem is that my camera is not focusing on this. So it's tough, but even now you can see that I'm in focus and it's tracking my face. I believe, there you go. You can see that it's tracking my face, but this is a tough thing to show live. But I like that. Oh, so what I was getting at is that you can use this screen to pick, as I showed you, what's in focus. So it's going to do a pretty good job of figuring out what you want in focus, or you can click on something else. And you can actually drag it around to set focus. And one of the things that I know you can do is you can open this up when you take pictures, and you can use, so I'd be doing this, and I can actually set focus while I'm taking pictures, and I can move my thumb around the screen and then use the shutter button to take pictures. So that's super cool. And that's going to be a good feature when you're taking pictures. And then of course this touchscreen also works for all the functions of the camera. And some touchscreens out there don't, so they'll only work for focus. But here you can see I can choose anything I want and the touchscreen works for everything. So that's a huge bonus for this camera. From Icy Blue, can you use an HDMI cable for the mic? No. So an HDMI cable is going to be used, well, it depends on what you mean. Not for the mic input, but if you use the HDMI out, it will also, HDMI carries both video and audio signals. So one of my other questions about this camera, and again, I'll cover it in the more detailed review, is about whether this has a clean HDMI out, which is important if you want to use this camera for streaming. So a clean HDMI out basically means if a camera, well, it's easier to explain if it doesn't have it. If a camera doesn't have HDMI out, that means that when I try to stream with this camera, you're going to see all these little icons here on the screen. You're going to see all the functions. And if a camera has a clean HDMI out, that means it outputs just the image itself. So it's a clean image that goes out and then you can stream. So that's important. So I'm curious about whether this has a clean HDMI out or not. Let me see. So let me go ahead. You know what? I'm going to leave that open, but just turn the camera off. And let me look back at the comments. How much is the Rode mic? Me, and is it worth buying? Please hold. You know what? I actually don't have a Rode mic Me. And I don't know how much it costs. If someone can look it up and drop it in the comment section, that'd be great. But I will say that it's always a good idea to get better audio. I think that that's one of the most overlooked aspects of video. So many people focus on the image quality and on the camera and on the lens and on lighting, and I think audio is so often neglected. And it's actually getting better. I have noticed that it's getting better. But if you watch a video and the audio has a lot of background noise and it's distorted or it's clipping, it really takes away from the video to the point where there are times where I just have to turn the video off, not because of the video quality, but because of the audio. And oh, I just got my first super chat ever. So thank you, Title Gardens, for the $5. And I see you got to run, but thank you very much for joining. And you are officially my first super chat ever. So that's it. No one can take that away from you. There's a question from GarageBiz. Can you show the white balance presets, please? Like, you want to see what they are, like what options you have. I would assume it's pretty standard over here. But let me go in there, and here I'll switch this view. Let me just bring it up on the screen. think I need to, there you go, menu. And I'm gonna find white balance. So you go into each one of these, and I do not know where my white balance is. So, So, okay, so this looks like a new menu system, and I am not figuring out how to, I'm in some sort of preset. Yeah, this is surprising because usually, so it'll be more difficult even if I show it to you. But let me see if there, looks like there's some interesting presets here for like background blur, contrast, saturation, color tone. But I'm surprised that it's not, usually all the Canon cameras, which are what I use, that I'm really surprised that I'm not finding the white balance very easily. Seeing autofocus. I bet you it's in a super basic place and I'm going too far actually looking for it. But again, very surprised that I'm not able to find it right away. That's shocking. But maybe it's because I'm on auto everything. Hold on. So let's see what comes up now. There we go. I think it was just because, yes. So it was just because I was set to auto, so it wasn't giving me these options. Now, this might be difficult to see because as I pointed at the camera, can you guys see this? All right, so here are the white balance options. So we've got auto white balance, we've got daylight, that's 5200 Kelvin, shade, cloudy, tungsten, we've got white fluorescent light, flash, and then custom, and a Kelvin option, which will let you actually set, I don't know if you can see, I can actually set the temperature of the light. And that's, oh, there you go. And I can set the temperature of the light manually. So those are all the options. And I see another super chat from Marcus. Thank you so much. And thank you for the compliment about the first live show. So yeah, sorry it took me a second there to figure out where the white balance setting was, but again, it was because up here I was set on A, which means it was doing everything for me, so it wasn't letting me change the white balance. Check-in Media says, at Tech Gear Talk, how did you come up with the name? Just wondering, I mean the channel name. So I love tech, and I like video and audio equipment, and I literally sat one day and was thinking, you know what, I'm gonna start a YouTube channel. And my background is in web design, advertising, marketing, and web development. So this is something I've always been interested in. I literally sat down and just started, just shot my first video. It was terrible. I shot my second video. It was terrible. And my third video was actually picked up. It was a product review of the Netgear Orbi. And it was picked up by Netgear, and I was contacted by them. And that's probably a story for another video, but that's what got this channel on its way. And it's still really, really new. So again, thank you so much for everyone for joining. I really appreciate it. So Tech Gear Talk, I knew I was going to talk about tech, and there are a lot of names that are already taken. So I had to come up with something a little bit different, which I had to use 3 words. And let me know what you think of the new logo up there on the top. I think for you, it's on the top left. I just did it, I think a week ago or so. So excited. All right, so from Garage Biz. Okay, looks like the white balance in the other Canon DSLRs. Yep, that's those are all pretty standard. I mean, and there are only so many options you're gonna get with white balance, right? There are all the presets for like predetermined color temperatures, and then you're gonna have a custom one that's gonna let you set your own usually you use a middle gray card, and then you basically fill the screen. You hold the card up right where the person is going to be, if that's what you're shooting, and you make sure you fill the entire frame with the middle gray, and then you can press a button or take a picture and set that as a custom white balance. And what the camera says is, okay, now you're telling me what middle gray is, and I can then adjust all the other colors. And so if you're familiar with white balance, you know that if you're using the wrong white balance for the light that you have, it's going to shift the entire color temperature of the image. It's going to either make it really blue or really warm. And so it's important to have white balance that is set correctly for the scene that you're shooting. And I don't like to use auto white balance because auto white balance will change based on what's in the screen. And if you watch carefully, you'll actually see, so like for example, you'll see that this looks like it's white. And if someone walked in here with a red shirt or a green shirt or a blue shirt, you would see that something shifts in the scene. And I don't really like that. So always set your white balance manually. Unless you really don't care, then you can use auto. Or if you're in a hurry, use auto. But most of the time, it's better. And it's really not that hard. So even if you go into Kelvin, which are those numbers that I showed you, just look at the picture and start going all the way from the bottom to the top until the picture looks good. And the more you do that, you'll know, oh, this is a little warm, I'm going to make it cooler. Or this is a little cold, I'll make it warmer. And I think part of photography and video is getting to learn not just about your equipment, but I mean what your equipment can do. All right, so let's go back to the chat here. And Check It Media said, I shared the stream on LinkedIn. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Again, if you're still watching, go ahead and share this link anywhere on Twitter, on Facebook. And if you haven't yet, definitely subscribe and then hit that notification button here. I'll go ahead and play that again. Fun little graphic over there. So if you're interested in more videos about cameras and tech reviews, definitely love to have you as a subscriber. All right, so wrong in the right ways. Do you have any opinions about as far as downloadable picture profiles for Canon consumer cameras? I've been looking around and seeing mixed, quite bad reviews for Cinestyle and not sure where else to look. So for those of you who don't know, Cinestyle is a picture profile that you can download, and basically that makes some adjustments to the way the image looks, because all the Canon cameras come with picture profiles like standard or vivid or portrait, and Cinestyle is a picture profile that you can use to make your footage look more cinematic. And in essence, it's going to make your image flatter. And what I mean by flat is it's going to make everything look kind of gray. And what that means is that your video is going to look terrible right out of the camera. But it also means that you've captured more detail. And I have a video, it's old, and so I'm sorry about my lack of personality in it, but I have a video that talks about exposure in photography, and it applies to video as well. And so when you're talking about exposure, an image that's overexposed basically is too bright. An image that's underexposed is too dark. And if you get to the point where something is so bright, it's so bright that it's white, that means you have no detail there. If it's so underexposed that the image is black, then there's no detail there. And there's nothing you can do in post-production to bring it back. So by shooting a flatter image, the reason why it's flat is that if you look at a histogram, I wonder if this has a histogram. I bet you it does. This will make more sense. Okay. So, boom, let's zoom in. This is a histogram right here. and it's going to show you on the one side the dark and on the other side the white. So if I'm going to cover the lens, now it's all black. You can see that the entire histogram is on the one side. And when I let it go, when it's all white, or gray, it's somewhere in the middle. And as I pointed at different things, you can see that the histogram changes. Now, when it's black like this, that means that if it's all the way to the side, that's black and I can't bring anything there. So the reason why we call something like Cinestyle a flat image is that nothing would actually go all the way to one side or the other. It would all be in the middle and it would look all very gray. But what that lets you do later on in post-production is to pull the black just to where you want it to be and then pull the white just to where you want it to be and get a perfect exposure. And that is something that I definitely used when I was shooting video with my 5D Mark III and II. So it's definitely something that I used in the past. But first of all, I had to install Magic Lantern, which is, you know, another OS basically that lets you do that. And at the same time, if you're doing that, you just need to be prepared to do some more post-production work. So like right now, for example, for these YouTube videos, I don't want to do a lot of post-production. I'm not making a movie. So if I like the image, I don't want to do any additional work that I don't need to. I still make small adjustments, but I pretty much want to get a picture out of the camera that's as close as what I'm going to need on YouTube. But I'm also not doing a ton of color grading or anything like that. So if that is something that you're interested in, then using something like a flat profile is helpful. At the same time, again, you need to make sure that that's something that you want to do. Otherwise, it's not worth the extra work. So I hope that that very long answer helped a little bit. So there are definitely uses for it. Like for example, with my cinema cameras that I use C100 Mark IIs. There is a wide dynamic range and there are definitely flatter profiles, and I don't even use them for this. All right, so from Check It Media, I love the banner also, but you maybe want to focus your thumbnails now. It's going over the place. You changed it a few times, maybe related to your logo or colors and style. So when you say, I'm not sure exactly what you mean as far as the banner. So let me know, please. Check It Media also says you have great thumbnails, but very busy. Maybe tone it down with the images or text. Okay, so that's good feedback. Definitely always looking to improve my thumbnails. For those of you who have YouTube channels, the thumbnail is super important. That's what's going to make someone who doesn't know you click on your video. If someone's a subscriber and they get notifications, they're more likely to watch it. But again, the thumbnail is what's actually going to make them click on the video. So it's like an ad for your video. So thumbnails are super duper important. The YouTube banner. Oh, I see the YouTube banner at the top, like on my channel. I got you. That makes sense. I'll go check it out. I think I just updated it. I don't even remember. So let me see if there's anything else that I'm curious. All right, so there is. I talked a little bit about whether this camera, or the fact that Canon makes a Canon Camera Connect app, which lets you control the cameras remotely. And one of the things that I noticed that was frustrating for me, for example, about the Canon M6, is that the Canon Camera Connect app did not work for video. So it would connect to the camera. It would let you use your phone, for example, as an external monitor, but you couldn't start and stop your video or change the settings. So that's frustrating, because the advantage is I can go and sit and see that I'm framed correctly. Even though with the flip screen, I can have my phone right here. And then I want to be able to start the video so I don't have to walk up to the camera and start it, or start it and then go and sit where I am. So it was frustrating that the Canon Camera Connect app wouldn't let you do that. with the M6. Whereas, for example, with the SL2 or the 200D, it's the same camera, you can do that remotely. So I did a whole video about that because first I thought I was missing something, and then I realized that you just can't do it. And I hope that Canon makes that available on every camera. I don't know why they wouldn't, if it's a functionality that they've already figured out, which they did because it's available on a few cameras. So for example, it doesn't make sense to me that on a $550 SL2, I can shoot video, like start video remotely using an app, but on a $780 camera, I'm not going to be able to. So hopefully you can. I don't know, but it will be part of my more detailed review, and I will definitely address it if it can't do it. And okay, so is the Canon app as good as the Panasonic app? I control my G6 with Wi-Fi focus and a bigger image. So I've not used the Panasonic app yet. After I do these few, I actually have one more Canon camera to review after this one, which is the G1X Mark III. And then I'm going to go ahead and try a couple of Panasonic cameras. So I'll be able to give you more feedback. And I try to only share the feedback, like my actual experience, not so much what I've read. So I don't really know yet, but I'm excited to see. I know the Sony app was great with the A6500. It was a lot more flexible than what the Canon Camera Connect app allowed me to do. And again, I don't understand that. I know I'm going back to it. See, now I'm on a rant because it's just software. Just have someone sit there and write better software. The camera can do it. Frustration. All right, so probably my last question about this camera is the time-lapse mode, and I haven't looked into it yet. So I know it can do in-body time-lapse, and there are two ways to, without ramping your exposure, there are two ways to do time-lapse. You can either tell the camera to take the first exposure and then keep that exposure for the entire time-lapse. That means if I took an exposure and something was dark, it's going to be dark, and as the day, let's say it's a sunrise, as it gets brighter, my image will get brighter because the exposure is staying the same. The other option is to say, set an auto exposure for each image. So now, when it's dark, the camera is going to try to make it brighter. And as it gets brighter, it's going to offset how bright it gets. So depending on what you're shooting, like for example, shooting a sunrise is really difficult without ramping because the change in exposure from it being pitch black to super bright is so extreme that the camera doesn't have enough dynamic range, well, no camera does, to be able to handle it. So it's like getting the holy grail shot of time-lapse of a sunrise. So it'll be interesting to see if I can do both. I would assume that I can do both with this camera because I can do it with the G7X Mark II. I can do it with the M6. I can do it with the SL2. And then my other question is whether it has a custom preset. So basically, the M6 came with 3 options that you could save, and then even a fourth that you could just do whatever you want with. So then you can set one for like people moving around. You could do another one for clouds. You could do another one for sunrise, and then you can still have a fourth that's a custom. Whereas the SL2, I believe it was, only let you have one setting. So you could change it to anything you want, but then you couldn't save it and reuse it later. It's not a big deal. Once you know these numbers, you can just reuse them. But at the same time, it's much easier to be able to just save it as a preset, and then every time you want to use it, you just select it. So from Check-In Media, the M50 is a bit expensive, I think because there are a few alternatives that cost less, and they have also a lot of functions. Is there a camera that you compare the M50 for, but that costs less? Off the top of my head, no. And again, I'm careful when I compare cameras to only base things on specs. So if they have a lot more functions, I guess my question would be, what are those functions? How do those cameras actually perform them, right? Because every camera will now say it can do continuous autofocus for video, but how well do you do it? And, all right, like cameras will have image stabilization built in. And although I think you should pretty much always use a 3-axis gimbal, how good is your in-body image stabilization? So it's hard to sort of compare it in the abstract. And I'll do some more thinking about that, and maybe in my detailed review or in the video I'll do afterwards, we can talk about that a little bit more. But really, I want to use this camera before I say that something else will do something better, or that this camera is better than another one. And so Check It Media says, I can see that you're a Canon fan. Well, I am a Canon fan, but I'm also aware of the limitations. So, you know, some of them are very hardline limitations. Not being able to shoot 4K, that's binary. You can either do it or you can't do it. There's no, I can sort of do it, or how well do I do it? You know, one of the things that I don't like about Canon cameras is they don't let me shoot at 120 frames per second, let alone 240. I'd love to have 120 frames per second in these types of cameras. I know I can go get a Canon C200 and spend $8,000 on it and shoot at 120 frames per second, but I'd love to have it in this camera. So I love the color science of Canon, and I like the image quality. I love the ergonomics of just how simple the cameras are to use. And again, the fact that the autofocus just works. To me, nothing matters. If the shot is not in focus, nothing matters. So I don't care what else. I don't care about the dynamic range of the camera. I don't care about anything if my image is out of focus. So like that's a starting point. All right, so I think we are getting to the end here. If there's anyone that has any questions at all, even not related to this camera, and I see Check It Media you are a YouTuber from Holland. And I was just talking to someone from Holland today, and it's my favorite soccer team. All the way back to the days of Hulet and Van Basten. And Van Nistelrooy is probably my favorite soccer player ever. So, all right, so there you go. I just dropped some knowledge in there. Or not really knowledge, but some personal likes. So Garage Biz says, compare Canon 50M with M50, I think, with the iPhone X. So, I mean, that's going to be a no-brainer. Like the M50 is going to be a better camera. Without question. I mean, it has a much larger sensor, better dynamic range. At the same time, I'm going to say, what for? Because you're always going to have the iPhone 10 with you. So you're not going to always carry this with you. So my first rule is the best camera is the one that you have. So no camera matters if you're not carrying it with you, right? I mean, it doesn't really matter how good it could be if you don't carry it with you. So for example, my cinema cameras, I don't take them with me. I'm not going to take them with me. You can't even take still pictures on them. So they're great for what I do in here, but they're not great for me to take on the road with me. So in that regards, I shoot a lot more on my phone because it's always with me. And this camera is going to have better dynamic range than the iPhone 10 or any phone for that matter at this point. But it also means you have to carry a camera with you. All right, I'm going to go back to the comments section. So from Arcadian CY, thank you for the answer about photography between the SL2 and the M50. I'll definitely go with the SL2 after your advice, and great live video and review. Does it support RAW? I believe it does shoot in RAW. I'll have to double check, but I am pretty sure that it does. And again, as far as what we talked about photography, I haven't used it yet. So I'll definitely make sure that I include much more photography in my next video. So Mike says, I bought the SL2 and am loving it. I'm not surprised. It's a great camera. And Mike, what lenses are you using with that camera right now? And Check-in Media just said, thank you for this live stream, and I have an idea. We're going to talk more in the future. I agree. I also have a pretty serious computer build coming up. So that's something I just wanted to mention before I sign off. One of my next big projects is to build an awesome 4K editing monster. And I will post a video about it in the next couple of days, and there'll be a section on my channel that's dedicated to it where you can go in and see the components and parts that I picked. You can vote on them, and then you can also submit your ideas or suggestions for what I should swap out or add. So I hope to make that very interactive. And computer builds are not something, or it's not something that's a strength of mine. So I know I have a lot to learn, and I'm happy for any advice that you're willing to give if that's something that you're proficient at, or something that you just enjoy doing. So Mike is using the 10-18, which is a great lens. It's this one right here, and a nifty 50, which is a pretty solid first lens. All right, so again, I just wanted to thank everyone that joined this live stream. Thank you very much for everyone that left me a super chat. That was awesome. I'm excited to be able to show you this first look of the Canon M50, or at least with me. And I'll definitely take all your suggestions and include them in my detailed review. That was really, really helpful. Marcus is making fun of me that I do need a lot of advice about my computer build. He's right. If you're not a subscriber yet, make sure you hit that subscribe and notification button, and please give this video a like, tweet it, share it. You can always find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Tech Gear Talk. Good luck, and see you soon. And I'm going to try to end this live stream, even though my computer doesn't want to. It really wants me to continue going. All right, goodbye.